Hi, everyone. I'm Jayme Lozano Carver, the Texas Tribune South Plains and Panhandle reporter. And thank you for joining us today for a conversation about the Texas Panhandle wildfires and what's next. I'd like to thank our major sponsor, the Amarillo National Bank, and foundation sponsor, the Amarillo Area Foundation, for supporting today's program. And since investigations into the fires are ongoing, I will also note that this is being recorded on March 8th at 9 a.m. Last week, a string of wildfires burned through the Texas Panhandle, the largest being the Smokehouse Creek fire that burned more than 1 million acres. People lost their homes, businesses, and livestock. We're talking about what comes next now. I'd like to start today with you, Judge Johnson. Can you tell us how you and the communities are doing now?
Well, I think it's fair to say that we're all feeling overwhelmed right now, overwhelmed with loss and overwhelmed also with the response. We're we're moving forward and things are getting better every day. We have managed to get all of the families that we've identified that have lost homes into um, not permanent housing, but temporary housing. We there were some hurdles to that, but we've managed to get people in homes or apartments of some sort. Um, our donation center has just been amazing, and we've had a team of volunteers out there that's just really done a great job of organizing and getting the word to people that have lost homes. They've actually spoken with every single family and identified their needs, and that will be ongoing as we transition from short-term recovery to long-term recovery. Um, but I can't say enough about our ag extension agents who have taken on the job of donation and resource disbursement. So we're in pretty good shape there. The county's doing what we can to offer assistance. So that the outpouring of help and support has been tremendous, but it's quite a task to get all those resources in the hands of people that are in need. We do have a an event scheduled for tomorrow. It's a multi-agency resource center that's set up at our exhibition building, and we'll have all kinds of services there tomorrow. We're going to have mental health resources, document replacement information, financial help, um, information regarding taxes, because we're coming up on tax season, uh, help for people filing insurance claims, um, try to get some folks their medical equipment, prescriptions, things like that replaced. And then that'll be a spot too where they can sign up for assistance to clean up their property if they haven't already done so. One of the things we're doing right now is, of course, cleanup has begun, and we've got several nonprofit organizations that are really good at this. And so they're on site, and they've been cleaning up, and they know how to sort debris, and so they've been doing that. And the people that have lost homes have been signing up for that assistance. So that's moving forward. That'll take a while to get things cleaned up, and there's time to do that. So, but that's well on its way. Um, I will say one of the things we've dealt with was the election. We had an election going in the middle of all this, and our clerk's office managed to keep that election going, and that was quite the feat to get that done. Um, but just lots of things that you don't think of, that you can't anticipate. Um, but we have such an outpouring of help and support, that people are just doing what needs to be done, and so we really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And like you said, this is something that really, even if you are prepared for it, it's still something that you really can't know how you'll respond to until the moment's there. So that does bring me to my next question. That's for you and for Monty. What can we learn about the response to the wildfires last week?
So one thing that has struck me is that, we had a big fire in 2017 that burned, I think, somewhere a little over 300,000 acres, and that was largely ag-related. We didn't have the effect on our city, like we have in this fire. But those, our ag extension agents, um, were the ones that spearheaded the, recovery effort, at that point too, and so, I can see where they've continued to build on that, and I'm sure Monty knows that we've used that as a model, and we had accounts set up. Um, in 2022, we had another fire in March that burned about 30,000 acres, and there were several homes lost then. I think maybe 3 or 4, and so that's when we started this wildfire release task force, through our county agent, and lots of local entities have a spot on that task force, and so we were able to just kind of build on that and use that as a model going forward. And we have identified a lot of ways that we can improve and have improved. And I'll let Monty speak to the agriculture side of that.
Yeah, so I think it's important, as she mentioned, is that planning. So I think one of the things that we've learned as we've gone through, disasters, wildfires, and hurricanes, how can we better prepare for the next time? So, in the disaster cycle, there's that preparedness, there's the event, and then there's recovery and then mitigation. So, how can we mitigate things so it's not going to be quite as bad the next time? And Hemphill County, they have been a stellar example of how do you prepare for a wildfire? How do you have things in place already set up so you can turn those on quickly? Because one of the things that's a detriment to a recovery is getting stuff up and running. So, working with that local county extension staff and with the county judge and this relief task force, that has made things turn on quicker for folks and has helped folks begin the process because you have that response and then you go into short-term recovery and those are kind of happening at the same time and there's
Yeah.
confusion and there's frustration as that process begins to transition. And I think having that task force has relieved some of that frustration and has people know they're just looking for answers. And the worst thing that we can do is give them 5 different answers from 5 different people. But if they have a place that they can get the answer at the time that they need it, and these task forces being set up ahead of time is a great way to do that. So I applaud Hemphill County for that.
Thank you, Monty. And I think one of the keys has been that our task force has actually, identified those families that have lost homes and have made contact with them many times at this point to identify what those needs are so that we can get the word out about, what are the things that we need. People have sent lots of donations, and a lot of that we fit with the need. Some of it is just not needed, but we've tried really hard to get the word out about, making sure the donation matches the need. And so that's something that's a bit of a struggle because people want to respond really quickly, and we're grateful for that. But at the same time, um, that recovery effort, probably in large part the donations, that becomes work.
Mhm.
And, you know, it takes a lot of people to get that organized and going. So It's been a little bit difficult um, to get the message out or make people understand that, we need to take a minute when we want to send something that will be helpful to make sure that it matches what our needs are.
Yeah, and that's probably this time around for us with our new disaster assessment and recovery team. That's one of the things that I see has been advantageous for us is we've got some people that can focus on what's coming in and what the real needs are. And then we have a way to quickly communicate that back to folks that want to give. So, right now our messaging is it's fencing material that we're kind of focusing on at this time. And we can, as people ask, what is the greatest need? We've got an opportunity to push that out through social media and our contacts. And that's probably been one of the improvements that we've seen from the agricultural side of thing is focusing more, taking that model that the Hemphill has about let's focus on donation management. Let's use that also in the agricultural industry. And, we got neighbors from 5 miles or 500 miles away that want to help. And so how can we make that help be most impactful at the end, the place where the damages have happened so that these people can get back on their feet.
Right. And I'd like to say I didn't mention earlier when I was talking about the event that we'll have tomorrow that we're able to include our Roberts County neighbors in that event, and I've sent that information to Judge Locke over in Roberts County, and so he and the Ag Extension agent over there, Hannah Sell, will be getting that information out as well.
In Francisco, how does a disaster of this scale, how does it affect local economies and livelihoods, and how can people begin to recover?
No, thank you for having us. One, as a native Texan who actually spent much of his childhood summers on the family ranch in deep South Texas, something I'm watching very carefully to see how we can support. From the economic side, I can tell you it's often underappreciated the role that the rural and agricultural economies play. The vast majority of services that are imported into an urban economy come from a surrounding rural economy. And we look at the sheer numbers of what the agriculture economy means. 10% of that is a Texas economy. 85% of that comes from West Texas and the Panhandle, and so this is going to have grave economic consequences. So we're going to be watching that very carefully. With just sheer numbers right now, the 1.2 million plus acres that have burned. Some ranchers and farmers have lost livestock. They've lost their inventory. Whether you're in that situation or you were lucky and you were spared to be able to save cattle, for example, there's a lot. This is going to be a long road to recovery. The grass has been burned. That's going to take a while. The infrastructure has been impacted. And it's not just those businesses and that industry that's going to be affected. All the elements of that support that ranching is going to be important. So for us, also what we see from the small business side is agriculture and rural businesses tend to start slower. They tend to grow smaller, but they tend to survive longer than maybe those in urban areas. So we're watching that very closely. I can tell you it's already going to be the largest wildfire in Texas history. We've been in communication with the state to see how we can support. Already FEMA has approved a fire management assistance grant, which means that 75% of the cost of that will be paid for by that federal grant. Secretary Vilsack here has directed the Department of Agriculture to respond, which means at least 200 firefighters for the federal level supporting that local response. And as the judge and I mentioned, some of these areas are still active incidents, and some are moving on to various stages of recovery. So a lot to do there. In my role, I've directed the Small Business Administration to make every resource available that we've been in communication with the state. So right now, moving ahead, we'll be working with the state in the coming days to go out and do an assessment and see what areas may qualify for relief through the SBA. And so we'll be as nimble and creative as we can to see how we can roll those resources out on the ground. And the data for us shows the significance of that event, but data without context isn't helpful. And so we'll be reaching out to local officials to see when we get that data, how we match that up with the local experience and how they know their communities to make sure that we can deliver. So across the Biden-Harris administration, we're really focused on this. Again, from the small business side, see the enormous economic consequences for what's going to take to recover and rebuild. We got the infrastructure damage. It's going to impact recovery even more. And so we're watchful and we're standing by to help, but it's going to have significant consequences. And so we'll be tracking that closely and be responsive as we can.
I will say on that note that we've made contact with the Small Business Administration. They're going to be here tomorrow to start assessing and looking at properties that have been destroyed. And then next week, I'm not sure what day it is, but next week we'll have representatives from the SBA here to talk to folks who might use that as an avenue of recovery.
Thank you for mentioning that. Monty, I know you had mentioned that you were in Miami today. Can you tell us about what the cattle ranchers are facing and what their needs are in this time?
And so just like Francisco mentioned, we've lost the grazing potential associated this rangeland country. And so we're going to be at the mercy of Mother Nature as we get more moisture in here and we get warmer temperatures. Again, one of the things that impacts recovery of that native pasture is availability of moisture and availability of warm temperatures. So these are warm season grasses that were in the dormant part of that growing season that were part of the wildfire. And so we're looking for that recovery. We can see some seedlings kind of already starting to spring back up, but it's just going to take a while. The other thing that we're concerned about and we've been paying attention to is, we have wind in the Texas Panhandle. I grew up in Stinnett, so this is home country for me as well. And so we will see, that impact of the wind. So we have spring wind in the Texas Panhandle. We've lost that native grass that holds that soil in place. So we're going to be looking at how we can manage that wind erosion as well. And so hopefully, as mentioned, that recovery is going to take a while. And we're just trying to help be a stopgap to get resources into the producers. The one thing that, our team thinks about and we focus on a lot of times, just as Mr. Sánchez had mentioned, is the economic impact on those families and then that economic impact on the communities. I tell people, these groups of cattle, these ranchers have spent years developing the genetics to provide a high-performing livestock that can reach maturity and reach that level of performance that they want. And it's also their 401k. So, that's what they pass on to the next generation. Just like when we have our retirement plan, we pass some of that along to that next generation. That's what this is to those people. And that also, as you have a healthy ag economy in the rural environment, you have a healthy community, so you have availability of resources so that we can have a dental office here. We can have a grocery store here. The school that has money to move forward on programs they have. So it's very important to help those ranchers recover so that the communities can recover as well.
And in terms of losses, I know that it's still, probably a while before we actually have concrete estimates, but can you tell us about what they're facing in terms of, just like you were saying, recovering years and years of work?
Yeah, so you think about just the length of the smokehouse fire, about 90 miles. Think that's a lot of infrastructure that's been burned. So a lot of those posts or way fences are built. They have wooden posts and then metal posts kind of intertwined. And as I was driving between this Miami back towards the net and looking, you can see a lot of the wooden posts are burnt at the bottom. And so they're going to have to be replaced. And so when you lose that wooden post, you lose a lot of that wire integrity as well. So putting wire fence back up is not cheap, materials plus labor. So that's something that they're going to have to deal with. Lots of miles. We don't think about how many miles of fencing that is, but it's several hundred miles of fencing that's going to have to be dealt with.
On that note, I spoke to Andy Holloway yesterday, our ag extension agent, and he's identified several programs to help ranchers. And so I think getting that information in their hands is going to be part of that. So I appreciate the effort that's being done, on the ag side to try to assist our ranchers that have lost so much.
And one thing, some of the extension folks that are out of the impact zone have been working with our federal partners, USDA, NRCS, and FSA, to get that information together to provide that to the producers in a format that's easy for them to get information. And I know that the Natural Resource Conservation Service of USDA and the Farm Service Administration of USDA have been working to get those initial meetings going and meetings with those ag producers so they can get the federal money coming in from USDA to help them recover. And one thing I would add is those USDA, be sure to come into your USDA office and meet with those USDA folks. Here I'm in the Miami Extension office, but it's also a partner office with the USDA. And so those producers need to make that contact with their district conservationist or their district coordinator for the Farm Service Agency. So that's important to get that information rolling. And when you come in, have as much information you have about the losses that you've suffered so they can help with that process and expedite things.
And I'd like to hear from all of you on this. What is needed to really support the impacted communities as they're recovering? We've touched on this a lot. I'm going to pause for a second. I don't know if y'all can hear that, but Lubbock tests their weather sirens every Friday at 9:30 a.m. And so that's going on right now.
Oh, yeah. I was an assistant agent in Lubbock. That's where I started my extension career. So
Oh yeah, I don't know. It always slips my mind. I always forget about it, and then 9:30 comes around, and it's like, oh, that's right. We do test this ever since the tornado. But like I was saying, I'd like to hear from all three of you on this. What is needed to support the impacted communities in their recovery?
So I think probably the main thing is to continue to identify the very specific needs of each individual family who has suffered the loss of their home and property, and to just keep identifying those needs and the resources that are available to meet those needs. Um, we've got people in temporary housing, but they're going to be transitioning into permanent housing, and so just helping them identify uh, the options that are available. There are a handful of folks who didn't have insurance, and so our task force will be, trying to put a lot of those people at the top of the list when we're looking at needs, and but just to stay with our folks until they have a long-term shelter plan or permanent shelter plan, I think is going to be a big deal. And we'll just stay in contact with them and try to support them any way that we can.
Sure. So we've had the opportunity, unfortunately, to focus on disasters in rural communities, things we've learned over the past 2 years in my role here in Kentucky, in Alabama, Indiana, Missouri, and now we have to have the opportunity to apply those lessons in Texas, unfortunately. For us to be able to roll out on the ground, we have to meet a certain disaster threshold. And so it looks like there's some significant damage. So we'll be working with the state to identify what areas those are. But that said, it does become incredibly difficult sometimes for rural communities to get a disaster declaration, even by the small threshold of 25 structures for SBA programs to be able to deliver it. And so one of the things that we've learned that we implemented through a bipartisan bill, the Disaster Assistance for Rural Communities Act, our normal threshold is 25. In rural communities, that can be difficult. You see the spans of terrain between structures, but disasters tend to disproportionately impact rural communities. So now, if in an area where there is a public assistance declaration from FEMA, which means there's significant infrastructure that's damaged, for example, we now just need to identify one structure in a rural county, in a rural census tract, and then we can deploy all of SBA resources on the ground to help. And so, and the other lesson that we've learned is in rural communities, we may need to, it may not be simple as setting up one recovery center or one business recovery center. We've created some mobility to work with local officials to see where we need to be, perhaps moving that around. We now have a portable loan outreach center, so we can go to disaster survivors where they are. Right, rather than necessarily making them come to us in rural communities, that can be a challenge. And also making sure that we work across federal, state, and local programs to help people navigate what are sometimes the complexities of disaster. Obviously, Department of Commerce works on fisheries. Secretary of the Department of Agriculture works with farmers and ranchers. We support the businesses that support those key industries. And so trying to make that as easily understandable for the disaster survivor is going to be critically important. And what people don't know about the SBA often is we support homeowners, renters, not private nonprofits, in addition to businesses. And 80% of our lending typically goes to homeowners and renters, and only 20% goes to businesses. That's what we'll be working if the opportunity arises to go on the ground and making sure that we do some education on that. And so the SBA comes in with low interest, long-term loans. I know loans is typically not the thing someone wants to think about. They just took an economic loss. But when you think about the subsidized rates, for example, for homeowners and renters, it's 2.65% over 30 years. For a business as low as 4% over 30 years. And so when you compare that to what's available in the private market, that is an opportunity for us to be able to help folks recover. And so one of the things that we implemented to help disaster survivors and businesses is now there's a 12-month deferment period. So you don't have to make your first payment and interest-free for 12 months. And so in situations like this, right, it's going to take a while to recover, a while to get back on your feet. That is the kind of breathing room that businesses, families need to be able to survive in the long term, and giving them that extra bit of breathing room. Also, economic and injury disaster lending, not just the ranchers and farmers, but all those businesses that support those, from equipment, right, where you get your feed, all of these things, grocery stores, as Monty mentioned, those kinds of things that need people to come in. You've got a narrow window to apply for physical disaster damage support, but economic injury can be months down the road, and so that we've extended that for 9 months. And so, depending how long this takes, a business may not know the kind of economic damage it's actually taking till months down. We're just coming up on tax season. We've seen some wildfires across the country. Unfortunately, Monty, you mentioned we've got a lot of heat issues that are coming up. Hopefully nothing else will impact the recovery, but we're seeing some folks now, I bet, in some areas where we saw some wildfires last year, now that it's tax season, they're realizing, oh, wow, I took more of a hit than I thought. But I'm still in that 9-month period, right? So I can go back and apply for some economic injury disaster lending. So that's a critical resource that's important for recovery. And then the mitigation piece. I think how do we replace repetitive loss with economic opportunity? So how do we not only help businesses get back on their feet, but now, on top of a loan from SBA, you can add 20% on top of your verified damage to build back in a way that's more resilient. And that's critically important. One of the things that we did is eliminate, you used to only be able to spend up to $5,000 on landscaping. That is now gone. And why that's important, that's not because we're promoting gardens or Francisco likes his rock garden. It's creating that vegetation space, that space between the fire line and your structures. And so we're trying to be creative in that way. And that's something that I think is helpful to help communities that are susceptible to wildfire recover. So our goal is to be as creative and as nimble as we can, and to make sure that the programs that often can be complex between local, state, and federal, to make them as easy as possible. And we're doing more work with our Secretary of Agriculture and rural partners than we've ever done before. In states like Michigan and Wisconsin that have Secretary of Agriculture declarations, people don't know that SBA can be on the ground helping the other businesses that aren't core to that aren't farmers and ranchers. And so elevating the knowledge of that, and those resources are available. We've seen a lot of uptick from businesses that are impacted, and all that is important to the ecosystem and making sure that community gets on a better path forward. So we're going to be making sure not that we only help people recover, but hopefully be more resilient in the face of disasters that inevitably, unfortunately, will come in the future.
I love that landscape deal. So, one of the things is think about as we begin to recover a defensible landscape for your home or your ranch. So that's a great addition. Thank you for sharing that. And I think the other thing is just need understanding. And like my grandma said, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth, so use those ears twice as much, because people they need to, like the county judge says, we need to understand what it is they need. So, and we want to encourage all those people to take advantage of the programs that are available to them. Some people shy away sometimes from asking for help, but just be an encourager during a long-term recovery that these things are available, and help them walk through that process of what it is they're looking for and what it is they need. And then just be that listening ear and being understanding that, they've just walked out of their worst day, and now we're trying to help them move to the next new normal so that they and their families can be put back whole and the communities can be put back whole.
I think that's a great point, Monty. One of the things that we've seen are, our people are proud, and they're used to being the ones who offer the help, and it's been a little difficult for them to accept the help initially. But with volunteers, these are people they know. They're their neighbors and people they go to church with and school with, and so we've been able to encourage them to accept the help that's being offered. I know one of the things that we'll do in the next couple of months is we will have a emergency preparedness meeting with all of our entities in town and anyone that was a part of this emergency effort and recovery effort, and we'll identify ways that we can improve, things that we can build on, what worked and what didn't work, and what we can do better, because I feel like we've done as good a job as we could under the circumstances, but we absolutely want to learn ways that we can do better, not only with the recovery response, but in the emergency preparedness arena, to make sure there's great communication with all of our entities to work together when something like this happens.
Yeah, and I'll agree. That's one of the things that we've learned is a good after action sit down and let's just visit about what was good, what was not so good, what was redundant, and how can we better serve those that they need answers, they need them quickly, and they need a complete answer. Sometimes we have to tell them what we're still working on that answer, but we want to make sure that they get the information they need and they're getting it from a trusted source and not 47 different times. But how can we make sure that those communications are clear and that we understand and meet the needs that they have? And that after action is very important. We've already started to identify some things that we can do better. This is the first time that we've had the opportunity to deploy the new disaster assessment recovery team and working with our local county extension staff. So we're here to serve that local community, that local extension staff. And so we've got lessons to learn as well. And always I tell people that it's not telling you that we did something bad. It's just how do we do things better? So that's what we want to look for.
And really the last thing that I was going to ask y'all is, whenever it comes to after disaster, we know that towns can typically be flooded with well-intentioned people wanting to come in and help clean up where they can, pick up the pieces however they can. Sometimes that can be chaotic, and it can lead to just too many people in an active situation. And I understand that we had that here with the wildfires. So I'd like to hear from y'all on how people can really help in these situations, not just in the recovery process, but also in the aftermath.
So one of the things that has helped us is that the Texas Division of Emergency Management has actually vetted some of those organizations that have shown up. And to make sure that there are safety measures in place for folks that are assisting with cleanup, and that people know that debris has to be sorted and things of that nature. So we've really appreciated that support, because that's something that we don't have the manpower to do on our own. So we've had a lot of help from Division of Emergency Management on that front. I'm sure Monty has some input on that as well.
Sure. So one of the things that we try to do, and as we have volunteers, is we want you to check in with us. You know, you don't need to go out and start doing things on your own, because we need to know where you are, and we need to be accountable for you while you're working through the process. So please check in with the county judge, or please check in with the relief station, or like an animal supply point that we have. Particularly because, you know, we need you to be credentialed. We need to understand where you are, and we've got assign you to a position of helping, because that's for your own protection. Because some people are bad actors. Let's just go ahead and say that there's some bad actors, and they want to go try to loot through things and take advantage of the period when we're in the response and recovery mode. So we want to make sure that we can separate those with good intentions with those that may not have the right intentions in mind. Plus, it also gives us a chance to give accountability for you, and you can get trained. Just like the judge says, there's steps that you need to take. You need to get aware of some personal protective equipment that you might need as part of that response, and we can get you onto a team. We can get you vetted. We can get you trained. We can get you accounted for, because that's the most important thing. At the end of the day, we always want to get everybody back at the location, get checked back in, and get you back home safe once you've done your volunteer service to the communities.
Our city manager and mayor said early on that anyone that came to town, contractors, people offering any kind of services, need to come to the city hall and register with them, so that they're aware of who's in town and what kind of services they're offering.
And the other thing too is that helps that local community to have accountability back to the services that were provided. You know, people want to know that what they've donated, what they've done has gone to help that community. And this is one way to help make sure that's done, by plugging in people where they're needed to help the communities that are in need.
And I don't have much to add on that. I will tell you, I accept to echo what the county judge said and Mr. Dozier said. Disasters are federally supported, state managed, and locally executed. And so we need to be in sync with the local communities about what their priorities are, what their needs are. And so for our model, is they'll be working side with the disaster teams that we could potentially send in based on what that threshold is. It doesn't mean we still have our district offices. We've got our small business development centers. We've got our economic partners that are from and of those communities, that understand those communities, and so we rely on them to help guide our work to make sure that we're synced up with local priorities as well.
And before we wrap up, do any of you three have some final thoughts that you would like to share?
So I think probably the biggest thing I'd like to share is that we are going to stick with our folks who have suffered loss. We're going to stick with them until we know that their needs have been met. People can contact me. They can come into my office or give me a call, and I'll listen to what they need and try to find resources to fit those needs. And that we're gonna learn from this experience, and we're gonna continue to do better. I'd also like to express my gratitude for those who have really supported us and come to our rescue and helped us in whatever way they could. I know I've been thinking something that I heard years ago. Somebody asked, in a situation, what can I do? And we all think that maybe what we have to offer isn't enough, but the answer is do something. And that's what we're seeing our local people do. They're finding a niche where they fit. There are people helping with donations. There's people helping with the ag-related side, people helping with the kiddos. There's just so many ways that people can help, and will be eternally grateful for those people that have shown up and supported us in whatever way they could.
And I would just echo that, just the generosity of people. 2 years ago, we were in Carbon, Texas, and we were going through this wildfire that hit Eastland County. And I know that there were producers in Carbon, Texas that have sent resources up here because they received resources from the producers here. And that's something that we see because, Texas has lots of vulnerability to disasters. We've got hurricanes from a 300-mile coastline all the way to such a large state. And to see producers, to see families, to see communities that have been impacted before turn around and help those now that are impacted is heartwarming. And just, you think about neighbors 5 miles away to 500 miles away reaching out to help as they can. And we just want to thank everyone for reaching out and helping the communities.
And I'll just close with, currently right now, SBA is on 17 disaster declarations across 16 states. And last year we responded to 427 across the country. And each one of those is uniquely different. And so when we roll out on the ground, our commitment is we'll be as responsive as we need, creative as we need, and we'll make sure that we pivot to make sure that the needs for this particular disaster are the ones we're focusing on as we try to provide the relief to the folks that have been impacted.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time. Thank you to our viewers for watching at home. And again, thank you to our sponsors, Amarillo National Bank and the Amarillo Area Foundation.
Thank you, Jayme.